Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 7 important articles. We have 3 articles that are important both for prelims and mains, and they require a detailed analysis so that you are able to answer any possible question, especially any mains question related to these topics. We have 4 small articles that are important for the prelims exam. So let's cover all these articles one by one and comprehensively so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. And if you guys are benefiting from our initiatives, do support us with your likes and comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Before we start, I have a very important announcement. As you all know, current affairs plays a critical role in the UPSC civil services examination, be it your prelims or be it your mains. And this is where most students face a big challenge. Many students are not sure as to how to handle current affairs given the dynamic nature and the evolving nature of current affairs. So this is where we took a pledge earlier this year when we launched Unacademy IAS English to make our platform a one-stop destination for UPSC civil services aspirants, including for current affairs preparation. So earlier this year, we launched a program called UCAN, Unacademy's Current Affairs Navigator. Currently, this program is available to our Plus and Iconic students who are part of our online classroom program. And the program is separately available as well for those who wish to prepare exclusively for current affairs with us. Now, this is an exclusive program and a very comprehensive program. Under this program, every Tuesday to Friday, there would be current affairs classes live on the Unacademy app. And the biggest USP of the program is that we cover subject-wise current affairs, and you will be taught by the respective faculties. Instead of having one generic current affairs teacher, our subject experts, they will teach current affairs from their respective subjects, because we believe that current affairs also requires a degree of specialization, because inevitably current affairs is linked with the static part. So be it international relations, polity, economy, geography, environment, ecology, for all the subjects, we have subject-based current affairs taught by the respective faculties. And we source the content from multiple sources in order to simplify your preparation. We source these topics not just from the standard newspapers like Hindu and Indian Express, but even from PIB, Down to Earth, Frontline, and other important sources for current affairs. So this program has benefited a lot of students. We have got a feedback from 2024 aspirants who wrote their prelims and mains this year, and a number of questions that appeared in this year's prelims and mains were actually covered by us. These topics, the very same topics, were discussed and thoroughly explained with practice questions given under the UCAN program. So given how the program has scaled and how it has been appreciated by the students, we have decided to further expand the initiative and make 2 sessions every month freely available on our YouTube channel. See, otherwise it is a subscribed program, a paid program only for the paid students. But we are looking to make just 2 sessions freely available on YouTube every month. And day after tomorrow, that is on the 3rd of October, I will be taking up a session on international relations to cover the current affairs from IR and also from internal security that have occurred in the last few days. So do join me live on October 3rd from 9:30 to 11:30 p.m. live on YouTube right here on our YouTube channel in order to attend this session free. And if you benefit from the session, then you can enroll for the program itself, which is a year-long ongoing program. So with this, I would like to start today's discussion. Let's look at the editorial on page number 6. This editorial is related to science and technology, and it focuses on the funding and resources being provided to ISRO, India Space Agency, as far as India's space program is concerned. The editorial is concerned that the government of India has not made available the resources that are required to boost the capabilities of ISRO. We all know that ISRO has made some incredible achievements, from emerging as one of the space agencies in the world which can lead the most cheapest, the most economical space missions, to even carrying out complex missions to the Mars and to the moon. ISRO has almost done it all. It ranks right amongst one of the top space agencies of the world. But however, the shortage of funding, the lack of resources and the lack of resource efficiency is something that affects the ability of ISRO to scale further and to prepare for the upcoming challenges. So let's dive a little deep into this topic and understand what the editorial is trying to point out. See, recently, NASA has suffered a major setback. NASA has cancelled a very, very important upcoming mission called the Viper mission. Some of you might have heard about the Viper mission. This was another mission of NASA focused on lunar exploration. Now, this was considered to be a very vital mission by the scientific community around the world, not just in the United States, because the focus of Viper mission was to explore the south pole of the moon, to explore the south polar region, to look out for water ice particles. India's Chandrayaan mission had already detected the presence of water ice on the lunar surface. So NASA's Viper mission was supposed to bring more evidence regarding the presence of water ice crystals, especially in the south pole of the moon. Now, this mission has always been critical because further exploration of water ice could provide a sustainable water source for future manned missions to the moon. Because currently around the world, a new competition has begun to head back towards the moon. In fact, it has acquired a geopolitical competition, especially between United States and China. China has already made significant inroads with several major lunar missions. Recently, for example, under the Chang'e series of missions, China has successfully carried out a sample return mission where it has brought back a sample from the lunar surface. So China is gearing up to deploy astronauts on the lunar surface in a manned mission, and it also seeks to set up a human base on the lunar surface in another few decades. So this pursuit by China, which includes exploration of the minerals on the lunar surface, has acquired an economic, geopolitical, geostrategic angle. The United States, which had scaled down its lunar program, has got back into the game, with NASA and American companies leading the way, and the US is accelerating its lunar program in order to stay in competition with China. So in this context, NASA's Viper mission was a critical mission which would study the water ice distribution on the lunar surface. But unfortunately, NASA has cancelled the Viper mission. Now the point is, why was the mission cancelled and how is this relevant to ISRO's funding and ISRO's lack of resources? That is what we need to understand. See, NASA was looking at the cost and the delays in the project. NASA believed that there had been a significant cost overrun on the Viper mission, which was becoming financially unsustainable, and also there were significant delays due to a few failures during assembly and testing. So given the poor track record of the project, NASA believed that it was essential to shelve the project entirely. But this decision of NASA has shocked the American scientific community and even the global community, because everyone was pinning their hopes on the Viper mission, which is very crucial to understand the lunar surface, especially the distribution of the volatiles present on the lunar pole, particularly water ice distribution. Now, what is interesting is that the Viper mission was already in an advanced stage. In fact, part of the project had already been assembled. The assembly was going on. The components had already been tested. It was already going through the testing phase as well. So with little more support, with little more financial support and resources, NASA scientists would have completed the project and maybe it would have been a successful mission. This would have significance for the global community and for human understanding of the lunar surface. But because of the delays and the cost overrun and the financial limitations NASA has been facing, it has shelved the entire project. In fact, it has had such a big impact that the scientific community around the world has been shocked by the decision of NASA, and even the US House Committee on Science and Space Technology has called NASA for further answers regarding why the project was shelved and why such a crucial project has been cancelled. Now the point here is, if NASA had cancelled such a key project, if India's ISRO had the right resources and the right backing with additional support from the government, we could have immediately filled the gap created by the cancellation of the Viper mission by NASA. Because India also has ambitious plans for the moon. We are part of the Artemis Accords that India signed last year with United States. Artemis Accords, it's a set of multilateral space exploration agreements led by the United States. The US leads the Artemis program, which is named after its erstwhile lunar program, and it's looking to bring back the lunar program in order to compete with China. So the US has signed the Artemis Accords with several countries, with several like-minded allies, European countries, Australia, etc. They're all party to the Artemis Accords. And last year, when PM Modi visited United States, India also has signed the Artemis Accords. So India, US and other countries which are part of the Artemis Accords, they are looking to collaborate and work together. They want to take up lunar exploration missions, put humans back on the moon with a future goal of setting up a human habitation, right? In fact, it's part of the Artemis Accords under which India's astronauts who are part of the Gaganyaan mission, one of them will be flown in another few months by the United States to the International Space Station. So there is collaboration with our human spaceflight program as well, with focus on futuristic lunar exploration, including a landing on the moon by astronauts and a possible human settlement on the moon. So this program, the Artemis program under the Artemis Accords led by United States, is seen as a competitor for China's lunar program. So India, which is part of the Artemis Accords, could have filled the gap created by the cancellation of the Viper mission. India could have worked with the other partners in the Artemis Accords if ISRO had the right capabilities and if government had shown the intention of giving additional resources to ISRO. That is the point the editorial is trying to make. The editorial argues that NASA's cancellation of the Viper mission is a key gap being created with regard to lunar exploration. This gives China an edge. China could take a advantage and it could further accelerate its own program, giving China a geopolitical advantage as well. Now the point the editorial is making is very crucial because see, India and Japan are already working on a joint lunar mission called the LUPEX, the Lunar Polar Exploration Mission, which is all set to be a lander rover mission with possibly a sample return mission being involved in it. And Chandrayaan 4 was recently approved by our Union Cabinet, which will be a sample return mission of ISRO. Chandrayaan 4, which follows on the success of Chandrayaan 3, will not only carry out a landing and deploy a rover on the lunar surface, it will collect the lunar samples and return the samples back to Earth. So Chandrayaan 4 has recently received the approval of the Union Cabinet. Parallelly, we are working with Japan on the LUPEX mission, which is another landing attempt, a joint mission by ISRO and JAXA, the space agency of Japan. So there were opportunities present here for India to replace the Viper mission. NASA, which has cancelled the Viper mission, has created a gap. This could have been filled by ISRO. The government, if it had given additional resources and backing to ISRO, maybe Chandrayaan 4 need not be limited to a sample return mission. This could fulfill the gap created by the cancellation of the Viper mission. to focus on exploring the lunar surface to study water ice crystal distribution. Or we could work with Japan on the LUPEX mission to achieve the same objective. Because it is focused on exploring the South Pole, we just have to build a payload that can explore the water ice presence, and that would require government backing and additional resource allocation. And that is why the editorial is urging that the government should provide more resources so that ISRO can play a big leadership role as well and complement the efforts of other space agencies. Because currently, despite all its achievements, ISRO has one big challenge. It can't carry out multiple big missions parallelly. ISRO's motto right now is to focus on one main mission at a time. Let's say ISRO is focused on Gaganyaan mission right now. The entire resources, not just financial but even the manpower and the technical resources available, are entirely diverted towards that one major mission. And until that is completed, ISRO is not able to take up other major missions parallelly. A big space agency like ISRO is expected to be able to handle multiple missions at the same time. But the limitation on its capability is largely due to the lack of resource efficiency. ISRO is not able to maximize the resource efficiency. It needs more financial support, it needs more backing from the government in order to scale its capabilities to be able to handle multiple parallel missions going on simultaneously. So if such capabilities are built, tomorrow in the coming days when China becomes a significant competitor, India's ISRO can work with other countries and we could fill the gap being created by other countries. So that is the point the editorial is trying to make. It means that ISRO needs more financial resources and backing from the government so that it builds the capabilities to have the required efficiency, to ensure it has the required financial, technical and human resources so that it can execute multiple major missions parallelly and simultaneously. So that is what we take away from this important article. Now I would like to give a practice question for your mains answer writing practice. India's space program needs more resources to realize its full potential. So take up this question for your answer writing practice. I would just give you a structure and you can follow that, use the points I have discussed and try to write a answer so that you can practice answer writing. So in this question, it's a very broad open question. It's not specific to any particular mission of ISRO. It's only talking about the current lack of resources with regard to ISRO. We are not saying it is completely deprived, but it does face a shortage. It could do better. The government has prioritized the space program, but the resource allocation is limited, which doesn't allow ISRO to focus on multiple missions. So if ISRO is given additional resources, it can realize its full potential, right? So it's a very open question. What you can do is in the introduction, you can start out by talking about the capabilities of ISRO. One small paragraph on the achievements and capabilities of ISRO. In 2 or 3 lines, you can bring out how ISRO has succeeded in some big missions, be it Chandrayaan or Mangalyaan missions or the Aditya mission that was recently launched, or talk about the future roadmap, be it the first manned spaceflight program, Gaganyaan, or be it the upcoming ambitious missions of ISRO. So you are essentially talking about the capabilities and achievements of ISRO. You can even mention how ISRO is able to provide the cheapest launches for satellites. And then in the body or at the end of the introduction itself, you can say that despite all these advances, despite all these achievements of ISRO, it still faces a crunch of resources. It still hasn't realized its full potential. Basically, you are expressing your view, your opinion, that ISRO is a successful space agency. It has a history of successful missions. Its capabilities are proven. Its achievements are well established, but it could do better. It could do much better and realize its full potential if it can overcome the resource crunch it is facing. So you're setting the context and expressing your view in the introduction itself. Then in the body, you draw the comparison between US and China, the geopolitical nature of space exploration, particularly lunar exploration, that is evident in current times. And you can give examples of Viper mission being cancelled, China making a significant headway with a recent sample return mission, and you can point out that if ISRO had the required resources, it could have filled the gap created by the cancellation of the Viper mission by NASA. Either India could have collaborated with Japan in the LUPEX mission, or in Chandrayaan 4, which is coming up. If the required support is given, ISRO could fill the gap created by the Viper mission, right? So, conclude your answer by supporting the same argument that ISRO needs more resources, financial, technical resources, more manpower. It needs to build resource efficiency so that it can run multiple parallel missions. Major missions can run parallelly so that ISRO can multitask, and it need not be limited to one major mission at a time, because this is limiting its true potential. So, that would be your conclusion. So, take up a prelims practice question as well on the Artemis Accords. I will not give the answer now, maybe tomorrow I will try to give the correct answer, but till then let me see if you guys can go through the question and provide the correct answer in the comment section below. Pause the screen for a second, read all the 3 statements carefully and check which of the statements are correct and select the right option and mention the answer in the comment section. Now, moving on to the second article, on the same page we have a column related to India's nuclear energy sector. In fact, today's newspaper has quite a few articles related to science and technology. This article is specifically focused on India's nuclear energy sector and the recent historic decision of the government of India to open up the sector for private participation. So, let us study this topic in detail. Let us understand why this reform, which has been introduced by the Modi government, is a significant reform in the nuclear sector of India. Let us see what are the challenges, what opportunities lie ahead, and how we can overcome those challenges. See, some of you might remember in this year's interim budget presented in July after the new government was formed, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced a major reform in the nuclear energy sector. The Finance Minister announced that the government is opening up nuclear sector for private sector participation. Now, this is a historic decision, a landmark decision, because until now, nuclear sector has been the monopoly of the state, of the government. As per the existing legal and regulatory framework, if you look at the existing laws and the regulations in the country that govern atomic energy and nuclear power plants, this entire sector was declared a sensitive sector for obvious reasons. Given the security implications and safety implications, the sector was classified as a sensitive sector and it was entirely reserved for the government. Only the government of India, the central government and its departments and agencies could take up initiatives in the nuclear sector, be it exploration of nuclear material or be it procurement of nuclear material, establishment of nuclear plants, conducting research and using nuclear technology and even disposing the nuclear waste. So, the entire operations in the nuclear sector was kept restricted to the public domain, that is essentially the government sector. So, private participation was not allowed. Private participation was only minimal at the back end, where the concerned authorities would rely on private sector for maybe helping in construction and manufacturing of some components. But apart from that, there was no private participation in the nuclear industry. So, now the Modi government has taken a historic decision to reform the industry and to pave the way for private investments and direct private sector participation, so that private companies can start setting up nuclear power plants in the country. And not just your regular nuclear power plants, specifically Bharat small reactors and the Bharat small modular reactors or SMRs. The Finance Minister announced that the government would provide fiscal support to the private sector to focus on setting up Bharat small reactors and Bharat small modular reactors across the country to leverage the potential of nuclear energy. Now, the point is, why is nuclear energy so important? If you look at our energy basket, Even today, it is dominated by fossil fuel based energy sources like thermal power, which is basically powered by coal. Close to 55 to 58% of our electricity, even today, is generated by thermal power plants. But the share of clean renewable energy has been increasing significantly. Be it solar, wind, hydropower, the share of these clean sources of energy has gone up significantly because of India's commitments under the Paris Agreement. Under the Climate Change Convention, as part of the Paris Agreement, India has made a commitment. We have declared our INDCs, intended nationally determined contributions, and we hope to install 500 gigawatts of energy generation plants from non-fossil sources by the end of this decade, by 2030. Is this clear? This is part of our climate change commitment under Paris Agreement. We have scaled up the target and we have pledged at the COP26 Glasgow summit in 2021 that we will fulfill this target that we have declared under the Paris Agreement as part of our intended nationally determined contributions. So India is prioritizing non-fossil fuel based energy as we look to decarbonize our economy. We have an ambitious net zero emissions target of 2070. So clearly India is on the path to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, to reduce dependency on fossil fuel based sources like thermal power. So as we focus more on clean renewable energy, nuclear energy becomes pivotal in this plan of India. Because if you look at the electrification of the economy through clean sources, one major hurdle is battery technology. If you look at clean sources of energy like solar, wind, etc., one big hurdle and challenge here would be building the right battery technology and procuring the materials needed for manufacturing batteries, particularly critical minerals like lithium, nickel, cobalt, copper, etc. So as we have discussed many times in previous sessions, India is deficient with regard to these critical strategic minerals, and China controls and dominates not just the supply chain of these critical minerals, which are essential to build the required batteries, but China even has a monopolistic control over the battery supply chain as well. So if India has to become self-sufficient, we need to diversify, we need to become self-reliant. So as we pursue different sources of critical minerals other than China, as we pursue advances in battery technology, we would like to diversify to other sources of clean renewable energy as well, and it's in this regard that nuclear energy becomes critical. Unlike solar and wind, you don't need batteries to store nuclear energy, right? Because nuclear energy is not intermittent. It is almost continuous. It provides a constant, reliable supply of power. Whereas solar and wind energy have limitations. Solar energy generation could be affected during night time, during winters, when there is cloud cover. Wind energy is again entirely dependent on the wind currents. So there is a need to store the energy because it is intermittent energy being produced in solar and wind projects. You need to store that. That's why batteries are critical. Apart from focusing on battery technology, solar and wind projects, to reduce our dependency on China, one way is to focus on other forms of clean renewable energy. The answer would be nuclear energy. Since nuclear energy is more reliable and clean, you don't need batteries to store that. So this provides the opportunity for India, provides a way for India to ensure that we have diversified sources of energy in our energy basket. And that is why the nuclear sector of India is going to be absolutely critical in the coming decades. Now, one challenge in the nuclear sector is that traditionally nuclear power plants are very large nuclear facilities. If you have ever seen images or visuals of a nuclear plant or ever visited a nuclear power plant, you would know what I am talking about. When we say traditional large nuclear power plants, they generally have a massive size and even their output, the energy output is very high. Those nuclear plants producing more than 700 megawatts of output, they are often categorized as large conventional nuclear power plants. For example, the Kaiga nuclear power plant in Karnataka, and we have several other operational nuclear plants in Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, in Tamil Nadu, the Kundankulam nuclear power plant, etc. These are conventional nuclear power plants which are very large in size. The problem with large nuclear plants is that it requires more land, correct? Even though they produce more output in terms of the energy output. Setting up those plants and operating them safely is a bigger challenge, because you need a large land area with a sufficient buffer zone to ensure that even if there is a nuclear accident, because nuclear accidents are a possibility, you need to ensure that there is no human habitation nearby. So you need a large parcel of land, not just to set up the large nuclear power plant, but a buffer zone as well around it to ensure the safety of the site. Even in case of an accident, the damage to human habitation can be minimized. And this increases the cost of the project significantly. And also considering the need for more nuclear material, the fissile material, the need for technology and safety measures, the cost increases even further, and larger plants are more complex, not just to build but even to operate. So the point is, there are many challenges when it comes to setting up a large nuclear power plant. The environmental consequences have to be considered. A possible disaster consequence also has to be considered, right? So as a result, there are often delays in setting up large nuclear power plants as well. There are projects around the world where large nuclear power plant projects have become financially unviable, or they have raised serious safety risks. So that is the reason why there are hurdles in the nuclear energy sector. So now there is a shift in focus where countries are trying to focus on small reactors, or what we call as small modular reactors. Small modular reactors, they employ the same technology, the same process, but on a smaller scale. Small modular reactors are categorized as those nuclear reactors which produce an energy output of less than 300 megawatt. That is the threshold. Kindly remember this for your prelims as well. When we say a small nuclear reactor or a modular reactor, it means that they have an energy output of less than 300 megawatts. So that category of nuclear reactors are categorized as small modular reactors. So such reactors need a smaller piece of land to set up. You don't need a very large tract of land. A very small piece of land is sufficient. The time and cost would reduce significantly when you set up smaller reactors compared to your conventional large nuclear power plants. You can quickly and easily set up these small reactors and modular reactors and even reach out to the remote regions of the country. Even in areas where there is a deficit of electricity, where traditional power plants are not operating or not supplying power, in such remote areas as well, we can set up small reactors, modular reactors, thus solving the energy problem and providing clean energy which helps decarbonize the economy as well. So the time taken is less to set up these reactors, the cost involved is less, and also it's easier to build these small reactors and small modular reactors. It's easier to operate them. The components involved, the technology involved is not so complex as compared to a large nuclear power plant. So that is why around the world there is a greater focus today on building these small reactors and modular reactors. In fact, today we are witnessing the development of micro reactors as well. Very small micro units that can produce nuclear energy in the range of 10 megawatts or below. Such a micro reactor can be so small that it can even be made mobile. It can be installed on a truck, or it can be installed on the premises of commercial buildings. Just like you have a diesel generator set in every apartment, in every government complex. On similar lines, in the future, you never know, a micro nuclear reactor can be set up. So there is a lot of research and progress going on in this domain to build small reactors called micro reactors, which provide an energy output of less than 10 megawatts that can power almost multiple localities, right? So this is how the world is transitioning in the field of nuclear energy, and India wants to follow the path. India wants to take this path of focusing more on smaller reactors and modular reactors while we continue with our large conventional nuclear plants. We need a mix of everything. We can't just rely on one approach or one strategy. So just like we have diversified the sources with some share given to fossil fuel, some share given to solar, wind, hydropower, and some share for nuclear. Within the nuclear sector, we are looking to diversify and focus on different types of reactors so we can solve the energy problem of India. But however, there is one major challenge, because see, the government is relying upon private sector participation to set up the Bharat small reactors and the Bharat small modular reactors. See, India already has the technology. For example, you might have heard of a nuclear plant at Kalpakkam in coastal Tamil Nadu. At the Kalpakkam nuclear plant, we already have a small reactor that produces 200 megawatt energy, around 220 megawatt of energy output. So our Bharat small reactor, which has been proposed in the union budget, is going to be based on this model. It's based on the pressurized heavy water reactor technology, which India has already mastered. India has gained mastery over pressurized heavy water reactor technology, and we can easily scale this to build the small reactors that can produce an output of 200 to 220 megawatts. So those reactors, they fall under the category of small reactors because the output is under 300 megawatts. So if the government can outsource the technology to the private industry, if the Department of Atomic Energy, right, the current nodal authority, and the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, NPCIL, these are the stakeholders, the government-led stakeholders which are running the nuclear energy sector in India. If they can outsource the technology to the private sector and invite private investments, we can easily scale the setting up of these projects and have multiple small reactors across the country generating clean energy. But getting the private sector involved raises legal and regulatory challenges. That is the key point of the column. There are legal and regulatory problems which need to be addressed by the government before allowing the private sector to participate in a sensitive sector like the nuclear sector. See, if you look at the current legal framework, the Atomic Energy Act provides for the legal basis for nuclear energy in the country. According to Atomic Energy Act, it is only the government, it is only the central government which can be involved in the nuclear energy sector. There is no permission for private sector participation under the current law. The current laws and regulations do not allow private sector participation. Is this clear? So that is why the column is arguing that if India wants to encourage private sector participation, then it should be in line with the legal regulatory framework, which means the laws and regulations have to be updated. They have to be brought in sync with the requirement for private sector participation. But however, there are challenges present here. Now see, if you look at the Atomic Energy Act and even the amendment which was done in 1987, I told you that it clearly establishes nuclear sector as a sensitive sector and allows only government to be involved in the nuclear sector with no scope for private participation. It's only the government which can produce, develop, use and dispose atomic energy and atomic materials. Recently, there was a case related to this at the Supreme Court. Just a couple of weeks ago, a petitioner had approached the Supreme Court of India challenging the validity of the law which prohibits private participation. The law, even in the current form, even after the announcement in the union budget, it still does not allow for private participation. There is no legal basis for this. So government has to create that. In this case which came up at the Supreme Court rejected this petition by stating that private participation is not allowed in nuclear sector according to the Atomic Energy Act. So we can't allow private entities to get involved in the nuclear sector. That's what the Supreme Court ruled. So Supreme Court has struck down this petition which was calling for private sector participation at a time when the government has announced that we will encourage private sector participation, which means the law has to be updated. The government has taken a policy decision to allow private participation in the sector, which is a very good reform. But to pave the way for private participation, to encourage private sector to invest in the sector, right, the laws have to be updated. The laws have to be in sync with the policies being brought out. So this case at the Supreme Court itself is an illustration, because even after the government has announced the policy reform, since the laws have not been updated, the Supreme Court struck down this petition stating that private participation is not allowed according to the law. The Supreme Court cited the Atomic Energy Act, which reserves nuclear energy sector only for the government. The other challenge would be the Civil Liability Act. In 2010, the then Manmohan Singh government enacted the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act to pave the way for foreign participation in the nuclear sector. After we signed the historic Indo-US nuclear deal and adopted the IAEA safeguards of the International Atomic Energy Agency, we had to match up to global standards with regard to liability. That is, who is liable to pay compensation in case of a nuclear accident or in case of a damage, right? We have seen several disastrous incidents around the world, be it the Chernobyl disaster, the 3 Mile Island incident in the United States, or the more recent Fukushima disaster in Japan. So, it is very essential to protect the people, right? Ensure that they can get compensation when such accidents occur. It's important to hold the operator of the plant, the manufacturer of the reactor accountable, right? You need to fix the liability. Again, if you remember the Bhopal gas tragedy, the justice was never done to the victims, primarily because there was no legal framework to hold the operator of the plant and even the government liable and accountable. Even today, victims of Bhopal gas tragedy are fighting for compensation. So that should never happen in the nuclear sector, and even before paying compensation, such accidents should never happen. To ensure that accidents don't happen, there is no negligence, no failure with regard to the design and the operation and the establishment of a plant. It's important to place the responsibility on the manufacturer and the operator. If you have a strong liability law, if you hold the manufacturer and the operator liable, along with the government also being liable, there will be more accountability. They will be responsible for any damages and accidents. There will be a big financial disincentive, meaning if there is an accident, they will have to shell out millions of dollars to pay compensation to the victims. So this will push the manufacturers and the operators and the government to ensure the safety of the plant, to ensure all the safety measures are taken without any negligence. So India brought out a Civil Liability Act, but it may not conform entirely with the global standards, because globally, as per IAEA recommendations, the accountability of the manufacturer should be limited to a certain amount. Beyond that, the operator and the government should become accountable according to global standards. Meaning the original manufacturer, even if there is a design fault in their reactor and if it led to an accident, their liability would be limited. Operator and the government would take up rest of the liability. But in India, the law doesn't conform with the global standards because there was a lot of opposition against the global standard. The parliament ensured, the opposition parties and the government ensured that we increase liability on the manufacturer as well, and a route was created through the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act, where victims can not only sue the operator and the government, they can even sue the manufacturer. So this brings accountability on all the stakeholders, increasing the nuclear safety in the country. But it becomes a disincentive for foreign operators to, or foreign manufacturers to bring their technology to India. But this law again doesn't contemplate private participation. The Civil Liability Act is limited to government involvement and foreign involvement. It doesn't talk about private sector involvement in the nuclear sector. So the law is out of sync. So if there has to be strict regulation and certainty with regard to laws and regulations and policies, these laws have to be amended and updated to suit the budgetary announcement that has been made. And also, if you look at the nuclear energy sector in India, the existing laws and regulations, they were all designed keeping in mind only the public sector, keeping in mind the Department of Atomic Energy. Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, which are all government entities. Even if you look at the research institutions like Embark and others, right, they are all governed under the Act, and the Act is based on the assumption that only government entities are allowed in the nuclear sector. So, if we have to pave the way for private participation, then the laws and regulations have to change. They have to be in consonance with the policy that the government has announced in the union budget. So, what can we do? Doesn't this create a hurdle for private participation? Right? This is a challenge, because tomorrow no private investor will invest if the laws and regulations are not updated, because nobody wants to be held unnecessarily liable or accountable. They want a friendly environment to invest. To encourage investment while ensuring safety and accountability, you need updated laws and regulations. So, maybe one way forward is that the government can think of public-private partnership. It can try the PPP model, which has worked quite well in the infrastructure sector. Maybe the government entities like NPCIL can hold majority stake. They can retain 51% of the ownership of any small reactor project or modular reactor project, while the private sector brings other 49% of the investment. So, still according to the law, even without Atomic Energy Act being amended, the project would still be government led, owned by the government. Right? If NPCIL has majority stake in a small or modular reactor project with minority participation from private industry, it would still be legal, it would be valid under the Atomic Energy Act, because a government entity still retains ownership over the project. So, this could be a way forward, a public-private partnership where government entities like NPCIL will hold majority stake, at least 51% and above, and giving a minority stake to private companies which can invest and operate in the sector. So, that could become an incentive for the private industry. Once there is legal clarity, once there is certainty with regard to regulations and policies, that would encourage transparency as well. It will create a more favorable environment for the private industry to operate, and it will bring accountability as well. So, that is what is needed. Either we amend the laws and update them to suit the policy changes, or ensure that public-private partnership model is followed, where government can still retain majority stakes while allowing for private participation. So, private participation is crucial to scale small reactors and modular reactors. Right? Government alone can't bring the capital. Private industry can bring the capital and the resources as well. And that is why private participation is crucial to scale the nuclear sector, but with adequate precaution for safety and security. Right? If something goes wrong, accountability, responsibility is very important. And also in a PPP model, these plants or these projects will still be accountable under RTI. Right? This brings transparency as well, as the project would be government owned with majority stake being with a government company. It would still be accountable under the RTI, right to information, where the public can get access to information, thus bringing transparency with regard to the project as well. So, that is what we learned from this important article. Now, please take up this practice question. With India opening up the nuclear energy sector to private sector participation, examine the challenges and opportunities arising out of it. Suggest a suitable legal and regulatory framework to facilitate these reforms. So, please take down the question, use the points that I have discussed and the structure that I followed, and try to write an answer for this question. Let's see how many of you can write and post the answers in the comment section. Now, coming to the third article, we have another important editorial on page number 6 related to the recent escalation of tensions between Israel and Iran and the recent decimation of Iran's proxies by Israel. It's referring to the tensions that have widened in West Asia over the last few days. Last few days, we have seen dramatic developments in West Asia. What we have seen in the last 14 days is almost like the stuff of a spy thriller or a web series that focuses on geopolitics and espionage and warfare. So, that is happening in real. Israel delivered a major blow to the most powerful proxy of Iran, the Hezbollah, which is a radical political extremist organization based out of Lebanon. In the last few days, Israel has been able to eliminate not just mid-level commanders of Hezbollah, but even senior commanders, including the chief of Hezbollah, has been eliminated by Israel. So we witnessed the pager and walkie-talkie explosions where thousands of these communication devices exploded simultaneously, killing and injuring several lower and middle-level commanders of Hezbollah. Within days, Israel took out the chief of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, was eliminated in a deadly airstrike, in a precision airstrike, that too in a populated area near Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. Now, these attacks by Israel not only marks a shift in strategy in the ongoing war, it also marks a big escalation by Israel, and it could push Iran and its proxies to retaliate further, which could widen the conflict and it could destabilize the region even further. So let's quickly understand what the editorial is trying to point out. See, Iran, which has rivalry with Israel, especially since 1979, after the Iranian Revolution, as Iran came under the rule of radical conservative Shia clerics led by the Ayatollah, who is the supreme commander, Iran has cultivated a rivalry with Israel. Iran has sworn to wipe out Israel from the map in support of the Palestinian cause. And in return, Israel has retaliated and it has targeted and punished Iran several times. So as part of this regional rivalry, both Iran and Israel have been fighting covert proxy wars since many decades. For example, Israel has used covert options to target Iran's nuclear weapons program. Israel has a history of assassinating Iranian officials, Iranian nuclear scientists, and even sabotaging Iran's nuclear plants. Iran also has cultivated several proxies by funding and supporting extremist groups across the region that target Israel. The three major proxies cultivated by Iran include the Houthis of Yemen, you can see here in the map, Hamas in Gaza, including a newer outfit called Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, with factions in Iraq and Syria such as Kataib Hezbollah. These are the major proxies that Iran has cultivated to be used to target Israel. Iran has covert links with all these extremist groups. Iran is known to fund these organizations, nurture their leadership, supply weapons and even provide military training and intelligence. And Iran's IRGC, a paramilitary force, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, is directly involved in these covert operations where it enables these proxies to target Israel. So this has been part of the larger great game going on between these regional rivals. So last year on October 7th, Hamas carried out a deadly attack, a terror attack against Israel, where more than 1,000 Israeli civilians were killed and hundreds of them were taken hostage by Hamas. Immediately, Israel declared war on Hamas and launched a major military operation in Gaza, leading to the Gaza war. Israel here stands accused of using disproportionate force, as more than 40,000 Palestinian civilians have been killed in the ongoing conflict. Israel has said it will not stop until Hamas is decimated and wiped out. So until 2 weeks ago, the focus of the war was entirely on Hamas, and Israel was trying to take out Hamas, eliminate Hamas entirely. In fact, recently Israel even assassinated the chief of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, who was on a state visit to Iran. The chief of Hamas, who was based out of Qatar, under Qatar's protection, stepped out of Iran and went to Tehran to attend the presidential inauguration in Iran. As you know, recently Iran lost its president. Former President Ibrahim El-Raisi died in an air crash under suspicious circumstances that led to a new president in Iran, and in the inauguration ceremony, Iran had invited some of its proxy leaders, including the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. So when he was in Tehran under Iran's protection in an Iranian safe house, Israel managed to take out Ismail Haniyeh, clearly pointing to the sophisticated covert operations of Israel, pointing out the intelligence network of Mossad, not just technical but even human intelligence sources, but because without that, Israel would have never known the exact location of such high-profile targets. So Israel has delivered a significant blow to Hamas, not only by decimating Gaza, by destroying the the network of Hamas, but even by taking out the chief of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. This is a big setback for Iran as well. Now, in this backdrop, Israel has shifted its strategy entirely. What we are witnessing right now is a shift in Israeli strategy. Now, with Hamas weakened, Israel announced a couple of weeks ago that it is shifting focus towards the northern borders, towards Lebanon. Because ever since the war broke out between Israel and Hamas, Iran activated the other proxies to support Hamas. Iran activated the Houthis of Yemen, who have been targeting ships in the Red Sea, trying to disrupt commercial shipping, especially targeting Israeli and American interests. The Houthis of Yemen have even fired missiles into Israel, which have been intercepted. So, on one hand, Iran has used the Yemeni Houthis to target Israel, to express solidarity with Palestinians and Hamas, and parallelly, Iran activated its biggest proxy, the most powerful proxy outfit, which is Hezbollah, based out of Lebanon. Hezbollah is this radical militant organization which was formed in 1982 in the midst of the first Lebanon war. Back in 1970s, a Palestinian militant group called PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, was based out of Lebanon and carrying out attacks against Israel in order to liberate Palestine, as Israel was in illegal occupation of Palestinian territory. So in 1970s, 1980s, Israel targeted the PLO and it invaded Lebanon in 1980-81 to ensure PLO is decimated and PLO is thrown out of Lebanon. This eventually turned into a full-fledged war in Lebanon in 1982, and Israel succeeded in removing PLO from Lebanon, and Israel even occupied southern Lebanon. Israel occupied parts of southern Lebanon to create a buffer so that it could protect the northern parts of Israel, because the Palestinian militants and the Iranian proxies present in Lebanon were targeting Israel in the northern parts, firing rockets and missiles regularly. So during the 1982 war, Israel removed PLO from Lebanon and occupied parts of southern Lebanon. It's in this context that a new outfit was born called Hezbollah. The Shia community present here, which was instigated by Israeli aggression, received support from a Shia Iran to form this new political extremist militant outfit called Hezbollah, which rose to power and became a parallel state in Lebanon. Israel has repeatedly targeted Hezbollah, and Hezbollah has countered the Israeli retaliation. So, over the next 18 years, Hezbollah fought back against Israel, mainly because Israel had occupied southern Lebanon, and eventually by 2000, Israel was thrown out because of the repeated attacks by Hezbollah. Hezbollah became such a well-armed organization because of Iran's support that it managed to push Israel back, and Israel was forced to retreat from Lebanon by 2000. So this had increased the profile of Hezbollah, and Hezbollah had become a very powerful entity. In 2006, this led to the Second Lebanon War. And this rise of Hezbollah took place under the leadership of Hassan Nasrallah, who was recently assassinated. Hassan Nasrallah rose to prominence within Hezbollah by 1990s. With the backing of Iran, he led Hezbollah as a prominent resistance force against Israeli aggression. Around the world, Hezbollah became a symbol of resistance against Israel's annexation of illegal occupation of Palestinian territories. So Israel made another attempt in 2006 to target Hezbollah, leading to another war, and the tensions have continued ever since. So now, when Israel launched the Gaza war targeting Hamas from last year, Hezbollah was activated by Iran, and Hezbollah started firing hundreds of rockets and missiles into northern Israel. So as a result of this war towards the Israel-Lebanon border, 70,000 Israelis had been displaced. They had been thrown out of their houses as towns and villages were targeted by Hezbollah, and Israel kept intercepting those rockets and missiles. So Israel made it a priority to bring those civilian population back into their homes, to ensure the displaced population is protected. And that is why Israel has announced a change in its strategy. Now that Hamas has been weakened, Gaza has been almost demolished, right, at great human cost. Israel stands accused of committing a genocide in Gaza. So, even though Israel has not achieved a clear victory, right, it's not even looking at a ceasefire, but it has weakened Hamas, which was one of its goals. So now it has shifted attention towards Lebanon, towards the northern borders, to bring the displaced population back, and the only way this can be done is by weakening Hezbollah or by eliminating Hezbollah. And that is when a series of attacks began. In the last 2 weeks, absolutely dramatic developments have taken place, starting with the pager and walkie-talkie explosions, which were remotely triggered in a well-planned supply chain attack where hundreds of Hezbollah commanders were either injured or some were killed as well. Now the chief of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed, and this marks the biggest turning point in West Asian geopolitics. In the last several decades, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah will have one of the biggest impacts in the region. So now Iran stands weakened as its proxies have taken a hit. In fact, just the other day, Israel has launched major attacks against the Houthis in Yemen. Even in faraway Yemen, Israel has conducted airstrikes at the Hodeidah port, and it has clearly sent a message to the Houthis, and Houthis are either ways not that powerful as Hezbollah. But today Hezbollah still remains a formidable force. Even though its leadership has been taken out, even though organization has been weakened due to these attacks, Hezbollah remains a formidable proxy of Iran because it still possesses advanced armory and weapons. It has thousands of rockets, even long-range missiles and ballistic missiles, anti-tank and anti-ship missiles as well. Now, there are reports that Israel is planning a full-fledged ground invasion into Lebanon so that it can dismantle Hezbollah. There are reports coming in that Israeli defense forces are amassing on the Israel-Lebanon border, bringing battle tanks and artillery equipment with armored vehicles, which is a clear sign of an upcoming planned invasion. So maybe in the coming days or in the next few hours, Israel might begin a full-fledged assault on Lebanon targeting Hezbollah. But the editorial is pointing out that this war on the ground will not be so easy. Israel might have seen success in a covert war when it carried out the pager and walkie-talkie explosions, right? Israel saw big success as it was largely a covert war waged remotely, right, through intelligence agencies. And even when it killed Hassan Nasrallah and other senior commanders through an intelligence-led airstrike, this was again a limited precision operation. But fighting a ground battle with well-trained, well-armed Hezbollah fighters is a completely different game altogether. So such a war is going to risk a bigger escalation because Iran also may not sit idle. Iran has already suffered enough embarrassment. In fact, few months ago, Israel and Iran even exchanged missiles and drones against each other. After Israel killed few Iranian officials, Iran retaliated by firing hundreds of drones and missiles aimed at Israel, leading to clashes between the two. So as of now, Iran might have taken a back seat. It has even shown restraint because after the killing of Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh, it was expected that Iran will retaliate, but Iran has not retaliated yet. So maybe either Iran is showing restraint, trying to tone down the tensions, or Iran lacks the capabilities. Iran has suffered a psychological setback because of the superior assault by Israel, including the covert war and the overt war. But either ways, if Israel keeps provocating Iran, if it keeps resorting to such aggression on the basis of revenge, because Israel's intent is very clear from the far-right government of Netanyahu, there is a clear intent to take revenge. And such a motive, be it in Gaza or Lebanon, could only harm the civilians. Already in Lebanon, 1,000 civilians have been killed, including hundreds of children. These are alarming developments which are happening in the region. And if Israel were to escalate the provocation, let's say if Israel continues with the ground invasion, it could face severe resistance from Hezbollah and it could push Iran to do something even more drastic or dramatic, which could become an excuse for Israel to launch a full-fledged war. And who knows, this could even turn into a full-fledged conflict between Israel and Iran. And such a war will drag the United States into it, as US unconditionally backs and supports Israel with diplomatic and financial support and military support. Such a war between Israel and Iran will drag the US, leading to a much bigger regional war which could severely affect the global economy. It could affect Indian interests, not just our energy supplies, but we have millions of Indians in the region residing and working over here, more than 10 million Indians across these countries. So at any cost, Iran also should continue showing restraint. Either it should hold back or whether it doesn't have capabilities to target Israel or it's a deliberate policy of restraint, either ways, Iran should continue holding back according to the editorial. But Israel especially should show restraint as well. It should push for a ceasefire and talks and not focus on revenge, not focus on escalating the tensions and provoking the enemies. So this is what we take away from here, because it presents us a reality check of the situation in West Asia. Now, coming to the last part of today's discussion, let's take a quick look at the prelim section. On the front page, the Hindu carries an image of the one-horned rhinoceros from Assam. The image has been captured in the Pobitora Wildlife Sanctuary, where you can see these majestic one-horned rhinos grazing in the grasslands and wetlands of Pobitora. So this is a very important topic for environment and ecology. So let's pick up the important points needed for answering a prelims question. The one-horned rhino is known by different names. It's also called the greater Indian rhinoceros, or the greater one-horned Indian rhinoceros, or just called the Indian rhinoceros. It's one of the subspecies of the rhino family, and the one-horned rhino, known for its single horn that you can see in the image over here, it is native to the Indian subcontinent. Historically, its range covered the entire Indo-Gangetic plain, from the marshy wetlands of Uttarakhand, Nepal in the Terai belt, across UP, Bihar, stretching into West Bengal, Assam, Bhutan, touching Myanmar. This entire stretch of the Indo-Gangetic plain, stretching across the Brahmaputra plain, was the native habitat or the native range of the Indian rhinoceros or the great one-horned rhinoceros. But over the years, the species has suffered a grave threat. It has been primarily hunted and poached for its horn. Right? There is a lot of superstition attached to the so-called medical properties of the one horn of the rhinoceros, especially in the wildlife trafficking black markets of China and Southeast Asia. Right? There is a huge demand for the horn of the rhinoceros, even the leathery scales of the rhinoceros. Apparently, this is attached with traditional medicine. There's a lot of superstition surrounding it. So this has led to large-scale hunting and killing of this majestic species, and there has been significant habitat destruction with increase in human population, destruction of forests, and also note that these rhinos are usually found in grassland wetland ecosystems. That is their preferred habitat. So these ecosystems have been encroached by human activities. Urbanization, industrialization, deforestation has threatened the survival of the species, and today it is listed on the red list. It's a threatened species on the IUCN red list. It's listed as vulnerable under the vulnerable category of threatened species on the IUCN red list. So this is what we learn about the one-horned rhinoceros. Coming to Pobitora Wildlife Sanctuary. Pobitora Wildlife Sanctuary is located on the southern bank of Brahmaputra in the state of Assam, and it's a very important habitat for the one-horned rhinoceros. Is that clear? Located on the southern bank of the Brahmaputra. Now, can you find out the other important habitats of one-horned rhino in India? Mention the top 3 habitats. Where can you find the one-horned rhinoceros? Not specific to Assam, but in India, where else can you find one-horned rhinoceros? Mention the major habitats below. Now, let's look at the next article. On page 12, we have an article related to security, because this year we have seen prelims questions coming from internal security as well. So, CBI has carried out a major operation against cyber crimes called Operation Chakra-Ill. This is a part of a series of operations targeting cyber crimes and cyber criminal cartels that operate at the global level. As you know, cyber crimes have gone up exponentially in the last few decades, from phishing attacks to ransomware attacks to cyber frauds. The scale is unimaginable. So CBI, which liaises with Interpol, CBI is the nodal agency in India, the law enforcement agency to liaise with Interpol and global law enforcement agencies. So it's working with partners like FBI of the United States and Interpol to target these cyber criminals who are operating from multiple countries. Because when it comes to cyberspace, there are no boundaries, no geographical boundaries exist. So these cyber crimes that occur, they are usually transnational in nature. The cartels are based out of some country, the hackers are sitting in some other country, they route the attacks through multiple countries using proxy servers and VPNs. So to take down such cyber criminal cartels, it requires global cooperation. It requires coordination with global law enforcement agencies. And the CBI has been actively involved in this area, and it has been conducting a series of operations called Operation Chakra. We have already seen two versions of this. Last year, Operation Chakra 2 was carried out, targeting online frauds, and now Operation Chakra 3 has been carried out, targeting these cyber crimes, the criminal cartels which were involved in duping the victims, especially in the United States. Right, these so-called call centers, they would call the victims, tell them that their systems have been hacked. They would trick them to get hold of their passwords or OTPs through which they would commit the fraud. So this has become a menace, and US had requested cooperation from India. So CBI with FBI and Interpol have worked together to carry out Operation Chakra 3. Next, a deadly outbreak of the Marburg virus has been reported again in Africa. In the African country of Rwanda, especially in its capital Kigali, a major outbreak has been confirmed of the Marburg virus, and several deaths have been reported. Now this is quite concerning, because the Marburg virus is absolutely deadly. It leads to a fatal condition. The fatality rate is extremely high. This virus causes a deadly hemorrhagic fever, and the virus belongs to the same family as that of Ebola virus. I am sure you are more familiar with Ebola. Ebola and Marburg, both the viruses belong to the same family, the filovirus or filoviridae family. They cause hemorrhagic fever and it leads to a fatal condition. It's named after Marburg, a place in Germany where initially the virus was discovered in 1967. Initial outbreak was in 1960s in Europe, in Germany, places like Marburg and Frankfurt, and even in Serbia. From here it has spread to other countries. In Africa, there are regular outbreaks occurring, and it's mainly spread through fruit bats. Fruit bats are the carriers, the hosts, the reservoir hosts. So those who spend lot of time in caves, in mountains, or those who live in proximity with fruit bats, they are at risk of getting infected. Hikers, miners, etc., right, who spend a lot of time inside caves and near mountains, and also researchers, right, or local communities who work closely or who reside nearby with fruit bats, they are at higher risk of contracting the infection. And there is human to human transmission. It can spread from one person to another through close body contact. When bodily fluids come in contact, let's say an infected person has broken skin, right, and another person comes in contact with the blood and pus of the infected person, the transmission will happen. Sexual transmission is possible, right? So any bodily fluid would be infected. Even the bedding and surface material touched by the infected person would be infected. So if another person comes in contact with it, they'll catch the infection. It spreads rapidly, leads to a deadly hemorrhagic fever, and there is no treatment, no vaccine. There is no specific line of treatment. There are no specific drugs to treat the Marburg virus disease, previously called the Marburg hemorrhagic fever. There is no vaccine as well to prevent. So the only option is to provide symptomatic relief, to provide symptomatic treatment and hope that the patient recovers. The fatality rate is in the range of 50%. On an average, half the infected patients are going to die. The range varies from 24 to 80%. In some cases, fatality rate has crossed 80%. It shows how deadly the disease is. So combating the spread and limiting the spread is very crucial. WHO has certain standards regarding this. So please read about the WHO guidelines on containing the spread of Marburg virus outbreak. Coming to the last article for today, the Council of Europe has announced the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize, which is a renowned award given to human rights activists, dissidents who stand up against authoritarian leaders and dictatorial governments, who stand up for democracy and fight for democracy. So this is an award instituted by the Council of Europe. Now don't confuse the Council of Europe with European Union. European Union is a separate regional group altogether. The EU is a political economic grouping. Council of Europe is another group set up in 1949. It was established in the year 1949. There are 46 members which are part of it. The goal of Council of Europe is to protect democracy, rule of law and human rights in Europe and even around the world. Primarily in the member states, Council of Europe is focused on upholding the goal of democracy, fundamental rights, rule of law and human rights. It encourages the protection of rule of law and human rights around the world. So that is why it has brought out this award called the Václav Havel Human Rights Prize, which is a well-renowned award in the world. Václav Havel was the former leader of Czech Republic, of the erstwhile Czechoslovakia. He was a critic, a dissident of the communist regime in Czechoslovakia during the Cold War period. And after Czechoslovakia collapsed in the post-communist world order, right, with the end of the Cold War era, he emerged as the leader of the Czech Republic. So, to honor his contribution, the award, the Human Rights Award of Council of Europe, is named after him. So, this time it has been awarded to the political opponent in Venezuela. As you know, Venezuela has been suffering not just under an economic crisis, but a political crisis created by the authoritarian rule of Nicolas Maduro. All Western countries have been opposing the dictatorial regime of Maduro, imposing sanctions on Venezuela as well. And there are political dissidents in Venezuela like Maria Corina Machado, who has shown the courage to stand up against the dictatorial regime. So Council of Europe has decided to award this dissident from Venezuela with the prestigious Václav Havel Human Rights Prize. On this note, I would like to conclude my discussion for today. Now, please find out other important initiatives of Council of Europe. In fact, in the field of cybercrime, Council of Europe has one important convention. I want you to research about this, find out which convention is it, mention that in the comments below. So that is it. Let's end the session for now. I hope you guys have understood everything, and if you benefited, do let me know with your likes and comments. So let's meet tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.